what the leader has to really communicate is the leader's intent. What are we trying to get accomplished? Which is really so much more important than a detailed action plan. The leader has to, here's the intent. Now, what you do by saying that, you're saying, this is the end state. This is what I want to happen with these parameters.
This is Lead with Culture. I am Kate Volman, and on this episode, we are talking about culture and why culture matters. And I am joined by our wonderful senior coach, Tony Ferraro. Tony, thank you for joining me.
Always great to be here, Kate. I'm excited today, again, talk about culture. And yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun episode. In fact, when we are thinking about, hey, what do we want to talk about on these episodes and how can we create a lot of value? We obviously as a team have different ideas and are talking to a lot of different people and are inspired in different ways from different conversations and different videos, different books that each of us read. And so, Tony, you recently read a book that really impacted you and you got all excited about it because it really is about culture. And so let's kind of dig into this book that inspired you so much.
Well, okay, it's interesting. I love biographies and more like timeline biographies. And so I picked up a book called Call Sign Chaos, written by General retired James Mattis from the Marine Corps. He was 42 years in the Marine Corps, rose all the way up to become the leader of CENTCOM, which is all of the troops in the Middle East area, and then went on to be the Secretary of Defense. So very, very established leader, very well thought of. So I just wanted to read the book to start with about him. I've always been interested in him. But what struck me right away, it was what stood out and how much he talked about culture and the importance of culture. And then what really stuck out is it felt like I was joking with you before we talked here that the books, the Chicken Soup for the Soul books, where they have like one for each, for mothers and for teachers and for all those things. It felt like this book was the culture solution for Marines. I mean, things that were what really struck with me was that the things were almost verbatim from the culture solution, the book, The Culture Solution, and the training that we do. And so, I have a keen eye, I think an eye for that anyway, looking at through things, but this just jumped out so much that when you asked me about a topic for an upcoming podcast, I thought this makes a ton of sense. Mostly, and you can speak to this too, mostly because we will hear when people are discerning or thinking about going into culture coaching with us or training, we'll hear sometimes, well, I don't know if this will work in my industry, or, that culture stuff, I'm not sure it's that important, or, we're a hard industry. We just heard someone the other day who was talking about culture, and he made the point, look, in my work, I just tell people what to do and they do it. And we don't need the culture stuff, which is like, you're a perfect candidate. So, and you probably hear the same thing, right? I mean, people get their head around what culture is and what culture isn't.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting. I always find it fascinating. This goes to culture as well as other parts of a business, right? It's like so many businesses think, I am so unique and different. And I'm like, yeah, you are so unique and different, just like everyone else, right? Like it's always when people talk about how they built their business, no matter what the industry is, the principles are typically very similar, right? I mean, those things don't change. And that's why I love the culture solution so much. In fact, I have told Matthew before, I was like, this book it's not just like the Bible for culture, but like for relationships and life, like life in general, right? All of the 6 principles we could say apply to all those different areas, right? Like keeping that mission king and communication and how important that is, having a plan, even higher with rigorous discipline. Who are you letting into your life, in your world, right? I mean, these are all things. Every single one of them applies everywhere. Coaching applies to parenting. Like there's just so much that you could glean from the book. And so I do find it interesting because like you, when I'm reading, sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the same stuff, just talked about in a little different way. But it's a unique perspective coming from the military because that's a very disciplined place. And when you think about culture, like what are their thoughts on culture and how important it is for them?
Right. And, what stuck with me was this is a person of influence. So he took a lot of steps to change culture, but he did it. Here's the interesting part. He did it when he was a lieutenant, which is the lowest of the ranks. He did it, as a captain, as a colonel, as a general, every place he was, and we'll speak to him, every place that he was and whatever level, he was able to implement these principles, these fundamentals, I think, which is what we're talking about. There are fundamentals to life, there are fundamentals to business, there are fundamentals to culture. And so that's another thing that stuck to me. He was able to, because we'll hear, well, I'm not the owner of the company. I'm not the CEO. I can't really, I'm not in HR. I can't influence. Everybody leads somebody, even if it's just themselves. And so the ability, though, that you can take that small unit that you're working with, you can implement the culture solution. And we've helped folks to do that also, even if it's just with their sales unit or with their one team. So that really stuck with me. And I think it shouldn't surprise anybody that, in military, you hear about the mission. We're going on a mission, right? So it didn't surprise me a lot that was in the forefront when he would talk about a mission of doing this or a mission of doing that. But he spoke of mission in the same way that we spoke of right away in the book. And it was interesting, very quick. He said, the Marine Corps exists to win battles. It's our mission. So if that's the mission, then every decision has to be made accordingly. Getting very, very clear about your mission. I had a really exciting call the other day with the two folks from a company. We started doing some culture coaching with them. And, they're getting real clear about their mission. And it's starting to impact then the decisions that they make. Because, as a leader, decisions have to be made that are best for the mission. That's why I say make mission the king. And it struck me. General Mattis was talking that, he said, building trust and affection in units is not the same as chasing popularity, which relies on favoritism, nor does it replace the priority of accomplishing the mission. And as an example, and I thought this was really powerful, for this reason, I came down hard on anyone who said, "Sir, my mission is to bring all my men home safely." We hear that all the time. But he said that's laudable and a necessary goal, but the primary mission was to defeat the enemy, even as we did everything possible to keep young men and women alive. So, look, we have a lot of tough decisions in our business to make, but I'm not sure the decisions you're making as a CEO, are life and death necessarily. But when you think about the stakes being that high and something laudable as I want to bring everybody home, yes, we want to do that. But there's a mission, and the reality of the Marine Corps is that there is a mission to accomplish. And that may involve that some people are going to give the ultimate sacrifice for that. So people will come with all kinds of good intentions to make decisions, and the leader has to focus on the mission first and foremost. It's keeping mission king.
Yeah, it feels like keeping mission king makes it easier to make decisions in some respect because it's very clear, like this is the goal. Like if this is the mission and decisions are made on mission, then we should know the decision. However, it's really challenging, which is why we have to have courage to make that kind of decision because it's the leader that says, okay, the decision for the mission is this, even though sometimes in the background they might be thinking, is this going to work? Is this the right move? So that's the part of leadership that is challenging, right? Like we take all the information that we have, know where we're trying to go with the mission, and we make that decision based on what we know, the information that we have, where we are, the people we have, all of that. And then we're able to make that decision. And so that's what's so interesting in leadership, where some people who, Matthew talks about it in the culture solution, disagree and commit. There's some people on the team, they're going to disagree with the decision, but they're going to commit because it's what's best for the mission. But in their mind, they might be thinking, I wouldn't have done that.
Right.
I wouldn't have done that, leader. And that leader has to be okay with the fact that some people on their team might be like, that was a dumb decision. I wouldn't have done that. Meanwhile, the leader's like, well, hope for the best, right? Like we hope that it's going to work out. And then you know what? If it doesn't, for whatever reason, you take that information and that new data and you make the next decision. Like that's all that we can do.
Yeah. As long as the basis of the decision was on mission, then you've made the right decision. And it's funny, sometimes the executives, the CEOs that I coach, they'll kind of lament, oh, I get all these tough decisions. So I finally sent out this quote the other day to all the clients, and it basically said, look, most of the time you're going to make decisions that you're looking for the least bad outcome. And I said, look, the decisions that are easy to make and have, a clear, good outcome have already been made by people under you in the company. You're getting the ones because it comes to you because that's the status of things. So, you can bemoan that as a leader. Oh, I get all these tough decisions. That's exactly right. That's what your role is. And so having the tool of what is best for the mission, then you're right. It doesn't make it easier, but it simplifies the process and it should give you confidence that if you're doing that, here's the decision. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. But that's exactly what you said. And then you get in the feedback loop and go from there. But leaders just have to understand those are the decisions you get.
Yeah, because how annoying do people is it when you have to make when you're brought those small decisions that you know your team should be making? You know that it shouldn't have gotten to you. You're like, you can make this decision. You got this. Like, we have to coach our people to be confident in the decisions they're making too. And keeping mission king helps everyone make better decisions because we're constantly focused on that.
Yep, 100%. And like I said, just in this stark life and death reality. I mean, I have a daughter who's a naval officer. So hearing that, I'm like, yeah, the mission is bring my daughter back alive. That's the mission, right? But that's not what she signed up for. I had to appreciate that.
I have a question because I'm curious to know, like, so how would you, Tony, coach a leader that you're working with and they have made a decision, right? You coach them through how to make the best decision. They kept Mission King. Now they've made that decision and they're kind of feeling I don't know. They're kind of feeling a little, I'm not sure. And when you get on a call with them, they kind of call, they're like, okay, I need an emergency call because I'm feeling like I made the right decision. However, I got a little pushback. And how do I work through this? Because now I'm questioning the decision that I made a week ago.
Sure. Great question. The first thing is when you make a decision and you're like queasy in the stomach over it, that's a great thing. And here's why. And I actually told somebody it's not too long ago. Look, that means you understand the gravity of the situation. And if that's the case, then that means you must have discerned, you must have looked at all the facts. But the fact that you're sick to your stomach over it, that's a good thing. That means you understand what's at stake and you understand that it was a decision that only you could make. And you should feel that way. So that's first and foremost. That's how it's supposed to feel. If you are making those decisions and just moving on and maybe you don't understand or maybe you haven't thought it completely through or understand what the consequences are. Now, that doesn't mean you regret things. It just means, wow, this is a big decision and I made it and it's going to feel a little queasy for a bit. Then you go from there. And then people with the pushback, of course, there's going to be pushback. Sometimes they're wrong. Most of the time they're wrong. And what is interesting is after a leader makes a decision and it's not popular and then it works out, no one, because I was wrong, boss. That was absolutely the right decision to make. That just doesn't happen. So that's the second thing. Really, adjust your expectations. People aren't going to slap you on the back for making a tough decision when it works out. They will give feedback when it doesn't work out, of course. That's the way that goes. But again, as you mentioned earlier, you make the decision with the information you have, with your experience, with your gut, your intuition. I mean, and that's the other thing I'll tell CEOs. What has your track record been of making decisions? Okay. You're probably not in the position you are because no one said, man, Kate is one of the worst decision makers I've ever seen. Let's move her up the ladder. It just doesn't happen. Right. You're there because you've made good decisions. You have a good track record. And sometimes in coaching, you have to remind people of that. When you really think things through, most of the time, does it work out well? Yes. Do you have a track record of making good decisions? Yes. Then, okay, then let it go. What's the data tell you? The data tells you that you're a good decision maker. You're not going to be perfect. It's just like athletes. Somebody that's on a basketball team that's a 3-point shooter, right? Okay. Are you a good shooter? Yes. Oh, yeah, I'm 0 for 4. Are you a good shooter? Yes. Over time, I've made a good high percentage of shots. Then keep shooting.
It's also interesting because as leaders make decisions, we are able to coach our team in that regard of making good decisions and not being afraid to make decisions, not being afraid to make the wrong decision, right? Like, because everyone on the team in a leadership role is, and not like we're all making decisions every single day. And some of them are trained, and some of them it's because we are being coached and we see what other people in the organization are doing. And so when leaders are making decisions, and then it's how they respond to the outcome of that decision that really influences the team because now they're saying, oh, okay, so maybe we could have gone a different direction. It maybe didn't go the way that we thought it would, but there was no big deal about it. It was like, okay, great. Data, feedback, moving on. What's next? What are we going to do now? And that really shows everyone on the team, oh, okay, it's okay to fail, right? And we don't even really maybe want to call it fail because it's literally just an experience and data that helped us move along the way. So great, we're going to take everything that we learned. And I love that question of, hey, what did we learn? We rolled out a new initiative, we started a new program. What did we learn from this? And now you're able to move on and make that different decision. So I feel like it's the decision itself, but it's also the way in which you respond to how that decision plays out that really supports the team and the mission.
100%. And, as a leader, sometimes you can just say, well, okay, you're welcome. I eliminated one possibility that won't work. So now we know that. And the last thing I'll say on that, sometimes, and when we say leaders, again, talking about you could be leading a team of two, you could be leading a team of 2,000, whatever it is. One of the things someone will come and say, what do you want us to do this? What should we do with this? It's not wrong to ask the question, well, what do you think we should do? And this gets in a little bit into coaching, but also something you said that's really important is letting people make the decision at the right level. Oftentimes, the person who's coming to you should be making that decision. And so by asking them that, they'd say, okay, well, that sounds like a good solution. You go ahead and make it. If this comes up again, you obviously have a grasp of this. Just go ahead and make that decision. A lot of things get pushed up that don't need to. And that also, okay, on the more cynical side of things, that does cut the CYA of people. Well, I'll make sure the boss signs it. No, what do you think we should do? And then people have to commit to that. And so you're making someone actually make at least give an idea of what they would do. And that builds in the idea that, hopefully the person leaves and goes, yeah, I didn't have a great answer. I'm glad that guy's making the decision or that woman's making the decision because I didn't have it. So it builds in that idea of that this is a tough decision and you're the person to be making it.
Yeah, it's ownership. It's ownership too, right? It's like everyone on the team needs to own their decisions because like you said, if you're leading a team or maybe you are leading one person or you're your own department within the
Right.
organization, then you've got to be really comfortable making some of those decisions and having an idea of around where you want to go.
And I think this gets into another principle that was discussed in this book and is obviously a big part of the culture solution is that what the leader really has to communicate from the mission then is the plan. But what's interesting in the military, and I've seen applications of this, actually working with a group now, and we're talking more about this, is what the leader has to really communicate is the leader's intent. What are we trying to get accomplished? Which is really so much more important than a detailed action plan. The leader has to, here's the intent. Now, what you do by saying that, you're saying, this is the end state. This is what I want to happen with these parameters. Then you let your team make that work. And so you're building in some trust in them. You're building in their confidence because they're closer to the problem and decisions should always be made closest to the issue. So you're allowing them and giving them some autonomy, but always go back to what's called the commander's intent in the military. Now, in the military, they use that because they will say, we have a battle plan and the first shot happens and the plan goes out the window. But the commander's intent, and General Mattis speaks to this, the commander's intent might be, we need to take this hill. And the original plan is we're going to go up this route. Well, the battle starts and that route gets completely choked off. Okay. Now, what can't happen is they say, well, that was our plan. We're just going to stand here. I don't know what to do. No, what the Marines have to know is it was the commander's intent to get to the top of the hill. Okay. Maybe we have to go a different way. Maybe we have to employ this tactic. Maybe we have to do this. Maybe we have to, whatever that is, but you're really promoting initiative on the part of your team and still getting to the end state that you want. And so we talk to leaders a lot who are micromanagers and they know it, right? But what's the intent? I feel like we work that way. Sometimes we're like, look, just get this done. Like, okay, I'll get this done. And, it may not be exact, but knowing that intent is so important because then it allows flexibility, allows people to take their own ownership. And you can just go back to what's the intent. And rather than the detailed plan, just having what's the intent. So that really stood out in the book is that this is what the intent is, and then over communicate that intent. And General Mattis, he made this statement that he said, look, he wanted all hands. He's going to tell the team the purpose of the operation, giving no more than the essential details and the intent to achieve the mission. Then clearly state the goal and let it go and let your people do what they need to do. But then he said, all hands had to be thinking all the time. what do I know? Who needs to know? And have I told them? And he said, I repeated those three things so much that they started to appear on index cards next to phones in the offices. So, because they knew he wanted people to be thinking, again, what do I know? Who needs to know it? And have I told them? So, you think about over communicating the plan. If you just boil it down in that way, what do I know? Who else needs to know it? And have I actually told them? We were having that discussion earlier. Like you said, I know you know this. I don't know this. I need to know what this. And you said, I know it's clear in your head, and you were right. I'm like, yeah, I know exactly what this is, but you need to know it, and I hadn't told you. So those are important things. So over communicating the plan is so important. Simplicity of plan, mission is king, but then over communicate it. What do I know? Who needs to know it? And have I actually told them? And here's the other thing that leaders don't like to hear is if people don't know it, you haven't told them enough.
Enough. Yep. And I love that you talked about the simplicity of the plan because we see that a lot with leaders who will say, yeah, I have a strategic plan. And then they get out this huge, like 1,000-page document, plop it on the desk, and oh, really? When's the last time anyone looked at this plan? And then it's almost like we get so attached to the details and how we're going to do it that we lose sight of what's the goal, like where are we trying to get to? And in fact, hey, this opens up a whole other conversation of people, right? Because there's some people that they're really comfortable with looking at a plan saying, okay, the goal is to do X, right? The goal is to have this amount of revenue this year. Boom. How are we going to do that? And then they get to be creative and think about it. While other people on your team might be like, okay, but tell me how we're gonna I need a detailed plan showing me line item by line item. And then you get to say, okay, well, there's a happy medium in between those two things. That one person that's like, I'm just gonna figure it out. And you're like, well, maybe like let's detail some of these things out, but not to the point where you now have lost creativity or you're so tunnel vision that you're missing out on what could potentially be a huge opportunity to help you achieve that long-term goal simply because you're so focused on, well, we said we were going to do XYZ and we checked it off the list. Well, is checking something off the list more important than getting to the outcome and reaching that goal? No.
Absolutely. I'm working with the team right now. I know they're getting tired of me saying this. It's a phrase that Jeff Bezos used. Don't let the process become the product. That is it. Boy, look at that beautiful Kanban chart on the wall. It is smooth. But are we getting things done? It's not that those processes aren't important, but the bottom line is it fulfilling the mission? Is it actually, because people can get really proud of spreadsheets. They can get really proud of processes, all of which are important, but that's not the product. And your job, most of the time we're serving customers, but we get kind of enamored with processes within. And yeah, my job is to do these charts, but actually your job is to communicate information, two different things. So same thing with a leader. If the people that you are in charge of don't know, it's your fault. And eventually maybe you do have the wrong people, but that's also your fault. So the premise is it's your fault. And if you do that, then you're in good shape. And obviously, once you have the plan and once you've communicated the commander's intent, then checking on people, letting them know what to expect. I was really struck that at one point in General Mattis's career, he was in charge of all the recruiting for the Marines on the West Coast. And he made this point, which I thought was really good. He said he spent most of his time with a small headquarters staff implementing my intent and orchestrating the team according to my vision. I spent most of every month out coaching my recruiters. That's where his time was. He let people know what to expect, right? And then he went out and actually checked on them, coached them. So you have to let people know what to expect, which we talked about. Then that brings us to the final point where he was huge in this book talking about coaching. I mean, right from the beginning, he said, regardless of rank or occupation, I believe all leaders should be coaches first at heart. For me, a player coach aptly describes the role of a combat leader or any real leader. So, first and foremost, a leader has to be a coach. So, this is, again, putting it into the context or the milieu of this is the military where it's real easy to do it because I ordered you to do it. And you talk to military people, those are the worst leaders, the people that tell you to do it. All right. That's where it is, but they don't coach you along the way. And he even said at one point, his whole career, he had 10 different jobs, it seemed like, at the same time. And at one point, he was just exhausted in this job. And he had given some, just really harsh feedback and not a good, not a coaching way anyway. And one of his subordinates called him on it, one of his aides. Then he asked himself the question, I was so tired, I had to ask myself, was I becoming more of an impatient tyrant rather than a coach? So there's a general asking himself, was I a tyrant there or was I a coach? Which part of being a great coach is putting your ego in check. Because if you're a leader, people will do what you say. You can get compliance, right? That's not a win. Getting people to be compliant is never a win, right? That just happens by the organizational structure. It just does. So don't think you're anything as a leader because people will be compliant. But can you actually put that side away? The most effective leaders check their ego and don't need that and actually want to coach people so that they can do their job really, really well rather than just dictate to them.
Yeah, that's the role of a leader to help your team grow. I mean, that's our whole philosophy, right? If your organization can only be the best version of itself when your people are becoming better versions of themselves. And as a leader, that is the role of that person is to help your team members grow. And how many leaders, when we think about the leaders in your life and why you love them, it's because they were great coaches. Like the people that I enjoyed working with the most, they were always coaching me. And I think what's so interesting about a lot of my friends that run really successful businesses is they're constantly coaching. In fact, we can't even be on the phone with each other without, oh, here we go. Like, because coaches want to coach and we want to be coached. I'll call a friend of mine to get a little bit of coaching or just kind of have a conversation. And then before we get off the phone, he'll be asking me, okay, what are you going to do next? And I'll be asking him, okay, how can I hold you accountable to what you just said you were going to do with that team member that you said you were going to let go and not sure what, you were kind of still contemplating it, but you've known for a year because we've been talking about it. It's so wonderful when you are around a team that no matter what position you hold, anyone and everyone on the team feels like they can come to you and say, "Hey, I have an idea," or "I have a thought," or "Hey, I'm really struggling with something. I wanted to bring it to you." Even if that means I'm struggling with the way that we are communicating and how you're coming across or whatever that is. And when we can have that kind of an environment where people feel like there's enough trust in the organization where you can have those conversations, I think that's a really beautiful place because as a leader, we don't leaders don't always want it. You can create a team of yes men all day, but that's really not going to be good for the organization or the individual. Like we want people that aren't afraid to speak up if they have thoughts. And then it goes back all the way back to number one, right? Keeping mission king. And everyone has the opportunity to share their thoughts and ideas. However, we might not go that direction, but as long as people feel like they have a place where they can feel seen, heard, and valued, no matter what the direction was. There's a lot of power in that for individuals.
Yeah, and you nailed it with that part about going back to mission. If you continually, if you foster a yes man mentality, everything's going to get pushed up to you. Why would I choose to take a risk when I know it's not going to, you're just going to berate me. You're not. So everything will get pushed to you. And you see that cycle where people treat or leaders will treat their people poorly. They're not coaches. And then they complain because everything gets up to them. Well, of course it does, because that's what you've created. So again, it's your fault, I guess is the point as a leader. And I think we should probably make this point that there's nothing soft about that. And sometimes it's really tough coaching, and it has to be. I don't think anybody, I mean, General Mattis's nickname was Mad Dog, right? Okay. No one would say, oh, the soft and easy General Mattis. Not at all. I mean, he was direct and hard at times and hard on people, but those same people that made us good at what we do, they weren't always really easy on us. So if anyone's listening and thinking this is about, soft and cuddly and all the coaching, not at all. It can be. I mean, but that's part of your personality. But sometimes it's being very direct with people, helping, asking questions. One of the things that General Mattis said is one of the biggest challenges was getting people to tell him things, because the military can foster, and organizations do too, a foster of no one wants to hear bad news. No one wants to hear I failed. No one wants to hear, so I'm not going to tell them. So getting people to tell them the truth, getting people to tell them when things have gone wrong is part of coaching. That I feel safe enough that it may not be pleasant, but I feel safe enough to say, I really screwed this up. And then a good leader, instead of berating them, we'll ask some questions.
Well, it reminds me, I once heard Mark Cuban talk about, obviously, he has, I don't know how many businesses, right? He is invested in hundreds of companies and he is a billionaire, very successful business person, obviously. And he says, I get a lot of emails from the leaders of the companies, right? And they give him updates on what's going on. And he said, the last thing I need to read is all your fluffy, oh, we're doing this and things are great and all the wonderful things that are happening. He said, no, tell me the problem. I am here to help you solve problems. So I want to know what's going wrong. Like, it's great that you're meeting number. Oh, I want to know all those, but not all the flowery stuff. Just tell me what's wrong. Like, what are you challenged with and what's going wrong so that I can now come in and help and support you. That's his role as the leader. And I really, really loved that because that goes back to, people in an organization. What do we want? We want our team members to know we're doing a great job. We have all this success. All these things are going on. But really, leaders and mentors, the same thing with mentors, right? Somebody asked me a question about mentors, and I thought it was interesting because I really love mentoring people who come to me and they have a challenge and then we're able to talk things through. I get to do a little bit of coaching with them. And then when they come back to me, they better have a very different problem than they did a week ago, right? Because I shared with you some information. Take it, run with it. And even if you failed, I'd rather you come back and say, hey, I tried this and it didn't work, rather than they feel like, ooh, it didn't work and I feel like I'm going to let her down. No, it's kind of like, ooh, this is exciting. This is new data for me to take in and figure out how can we now move forward and make a different decision and see where that goes instead. And so it really just comes down to, this is the culture, right? You're creating a coaching culture where people feel like they're able to have those conversations. And only when you have that are you really going to come up with some of the best ideas to really be able to move your business forward.
Right. I think kind of the wrapping up statement that was in the book is that General Mattis said, and listen to this, it's all about clear goals and effective coaching. It's all about clear goals. And people have an idea of the Marine Corps of being very rigid. And listen, it's very disciplined, but they actually pride themselves on creativity and leadership at the lowest level. So a Marine is expected to, I think they say, improvise, overcome, and adapt. Here's the intent, figure out a way to get it done. And we're going to continually coach you on what you did right, what you did wrong, so that you learn from the next time. It's a much more creative environment, probably any of the other branches of the service, because they're just expected to do more with less all the time. And that's what they expect out of folks. My future son-in-law is a Marine officer, and is in training now. And then they just talk about, how are you going to solve this problem? And they coach them and they coach them and they coach them. So again, to hear someone in a kind of unique environment talk about the exact same principles, and not just in theory. That's why I really even want to talk about. This wasn't in theory. This was like verbatim of what we were talking about. So oftentimes you hear things, you go, okay, maybe we are onto something. Maybe these are immutable principles that they work across any level of the organization, across any industry. And the organizations they work on are those with people in them. And so I wanted to bring that to everybody's attention, to know that they are immutable principles. They do work. It is simple, right? It's not easy, but it is simple. And we see it every day. We can help people to implement these principles, and it really can transform a culture. And most importantly, grow your business. That's the goal. That's the end game, is to have a wildly successful organization and meet all your goals, financial and otherwise. This is a way to get there, and it's probably the only way to get there long term.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really going, and Matthew shares in the book, it's getting back to the basics. When you really think about it and you read these principles and even the principles that we just went over today, it seems very duh. Like, of course, like this stuff makes sense. We don't have to question it. And Tony, you had mentioned this is not light and fluffy. And we do recognize, obviously, one of the reasons we wanted to start this podcast is to have real conversations with leaders that are in the field doing the work, being able to have these conversations, because we get it. It's very easy to talk about these things, right? After the fact, especially after we've done something or after we've made a decision. As That's why we love reading biographies and autobiographies and books where we get to hear and experience the challenges that people have gone through, because it is not easy while you're going through it. When you're making the decision and when you're leading your team and when you're coaching your people and you want to bang your head against the wall because you're not sure if they're ever going to get it, and so we don't make light of that in any way. Obviously, leadership is challenging. It's hard and it's why, but it's so rewarding and it's so fulfilling. And so the leaders that are so remarkable. They are the best coaches. And that is what we really love to do. And so if you are leading a team, if you're running a business and you're growing a business and you're really excited about that, and you've never had a coach, or maybe you're thinking, hey, I've had a coach maybe here and there or dabbled, but I would really benefit from having someone who I can talk to and have that third party person that has no agenda on what's going on, and I can really talk through some of this stuff with, and your team as well. I mean, think about the value that it provides your team to have a third party, not you, not someone else in the organization, but someone that completely has no agenda to anything else other than helping that person grow and become the best version of themselves so that they can grow in their role and help the organization become the best version of themselves. And so if you're interested in exploring what that might look like for you, as you can see, this is what we do all day. We get very excited about talking about culture and coaching, and we would love to be able to serve you really powerfully in your organization and with your people. So you can go to floydcoaching.com to check that out. And we invite you to have a call with someone on our team just to have an exploratory conversation and say, and let us know where you are, where you want to go, and how we might be a great fit to help you get there. Tony, so great. This was an awesome episode. I hope that everyone got a lot of value out of it. I truly appreciate your perspective and when you bring different ideas to the table for the show. So thank you. Thanks for introducing us to a new book.
There you go. Excellent. No, it was my pleasure. I enjoyed it. And so took a lot from that. So sometimes reinforcement is much more important than a new idea, when you're onto something. And that's what this book did for me. So
Oh, write that down, people. That's like really a good point because I think it's so easy for us to want to get new. What is the new thing, the new idea? When no, you're doing the right thing. It's just might just be you're on a little different of a journey than you would have chosen for yourself. Oh my gosh, you guys are awesome. Thank you so much for listening. We so appreciate you. We appreciate you enjoying the podcast. And if there's anything that you want us to, any topics that you want to explore or have us explore, we would love for you to reach out to us. We love doing this show and we're just so grateful for all of you. So thank you so much for listening. Please pass it along to someone on your team, to a colleague, a friend, another leader in your life that you think would really value from the content that we share. And until next time, lead with culture. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. Tony, thank you so much for sharing your insight as always. And if you are thinking through, hey, I would love to have a coach, somebody who is going to ask me those questions, whether you're going through an emotional challenge or whatever it is in your life, being a leader, we don't always have those people to talk to when we're trying to make really great decisions. And so if you're interested in discovering what that would look like in your world, having a coach to hold you accountable, to ask you great questions, to help you and your team become the best version of themselves, we would love to talk to you. You can go over to floydcoaching.com and someone on our team will give you a call and we'll just have a conversation. Tony, thank you so much as always.
Great to be here, Kate. Thank you.
All right. And as always, thank you guys for listening. And until next time, lead with culture.